As we continue our What If series on today's edition of Locked On Eagles, we explore what if the Philadelphia Eagles did not draft Jalen Hurts and Carson Wentz still regressed in 2020. How do things work at quarterback moving forward? We'll get into that coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 back in bonus bets. All you got to do is win your first $5 bet. I'm your host, Louis DiBiase. Thanks so much for tuning in. Got another show for you tomorrow as well as you get ready for the 4th of July. 3 to 4 shows a week for a couple weeks here, and then we're back to daily Monday through Friday when Eagles training camp rolls around. But we also have actually 5 to 6 episodes a week because we have 2 squad shows live on YouTube every Tuesday and Thursday with myself, Mark Farzetta, Harry Mays, and Jason Martius. So make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and all of our podcast platforms that you get the show in audio form. Yesterday, we started back the What If series that we did about 3 years ago, where we go back in time and explore different scenarios in Eagles history. What if things played out in a different way? Yesterday, we talked a lot about 2022. What would have happened in 2023 and 2024 if the Eagles won Super Bowl 57? What would have happened before that if the Eagles never ended up pulling off that blockbuster trade for A.J. Brown during the 2022 NFL Draft? How do things change for Jalen Hurts and Devontae Smith? Do the Eagles make it to Super Bowl 57 that year? I explored those possibilities yesterday on the show, so check out that episode. Today, we're going to go back a year and 2 years earlier than 2022, and we're going to talk about some quarterback what-ifs. And when I was doing this series back in 2020, a lot of them at that time, of course, because it was actually the offseason after 2020, so Carson Wentz was on the way out. So naturally, we explored a lot of Carson Wentz what-ifs. But a couple of them that we didn't explore, I want to get into today. And the first one is, what would have happened after 2020? If the Philadelphia Eagles, let's say during the 2020 draft, they do recognize that, hey, even though we need a backup quarterback because Carson Wentz just cannot finish playoff games or even play in them. Jadeveon Clowney just took him out, had a concussion, played 2 drives, boom, he's out. Josh McCown's got to play. Like, we know we need a good backup, but Carson Wentz's psyche is fragile after the Nick Foles situation that played out in 2017 and 2018. Like, we know it's going to hurt his confidence. It's going to get in his head. If we draft a backup quarterback in the second round, he's going to feel challenged. This could go very poorly. Let's say Howie Roseman recognizes that, which I don't think he did at the time, or at least he didn't prioritize that. And he doesn't draft Jalen Hurts. But let's say Carson Wentz still regresses to the same level that he did in 2020, which I think was a historical regression, considering who Carson was in 2019. And that wasn't an elite quarterback, but it was still a very good quarterback that carried a bruised and battered offense to a division championship in the playoffs. Let's say he goes from that to 2020, who he was. That's still a historical regression. But you don't have Jalen Hurts this time to pretty much save you and bring you into this golden era of Eagles football where in the next 4 years, he brings you to 2 Super Bowls, outplays Patrick Mahomes in both of them, and he wins one of them for you. Like, let's say Jalen's not on this team to be your new franchise quarterback, unexpectedly so. What the hell does Howie Roseman do at the quarterback position? This is something that I've been fascinated to talk about on the show. Like, what if they never draft Jalen in 2020? And now, granted, take it with a grain of salt. I do think Jalen Hurts being drafted was the main reason that Carson Wentz regressed the way he did in 2020. You don't go from who Carson was in 2019 to 2020 randomly. And there's a lot of factors. Like, Carson was slowly regressing year after year, so a lot of it is on him and the bad habits that he let build up every single year. A lot of it was on just the decimated offensive line in 2020. They had 14 different starting offensive line combinations that year, which was rare for the Eagles to have that much instability. They had no weapons. It's Travis Fulgham and Greg Ward, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, just nothing to work with. But Carson in the past had been able to overcome all of that. It was because, number 2, Jalen Hurts was breathing down his neck on the sideline. And I think that he was in his head. Carson lost confidence after that draft pick. So I think that was the main reason he regressed, and he probably doesn't end up that bad in 2020 if they don't draft Jalen Hurts. But if he still ends up being that bad, what was their plan? Like, what do you do in that situation? I think, number one, they certainly still bring him back in 2021. Like, I think the Eagles don't give up on Carson Wentz because they don't have a Jalen Hurts to turn to after that season. Like, I don't really think that they focus on, a 2021 draft pick. Like, I don't think they go after a Justin Fields or a Mac Jones. I think they run it back with Carson. They try to make it work. They try to do what they did for Jalen Hurts, and maybe they still draft Devontae Smith. Maybe they make even more effort to surround him with weapons and better offensive line. Because I don't think Carson Wentz requests a trade in 2021, even if he was that bad again in 2020, but Jalen Hurts isn't there to compete with the following year. I don't think Carson is as outraged at how the situation played out. I don't think he forces his way out the way he did in the 2020 offseason, 2021, to get to Indianapolis. So I think what happens is Carson Wentz does come back. They give him another chance to be who he was in 2019. And it's also because their hands are kind of tied. Like, what else are they going to do? I still think they hire Nick Sirianni, because I think when they hired Sirianni, originally it was with fixing Carson Wentz at the focal point of that decision. I think they said Carson Wentz was great with Frank Reich as his offensive coordinator. Who is Frank Reich's go-to guy, his right-hand man in Indianapolis? It's his offensive coordinator, Nick Sirianni. Let's bring Nick in to help Carson Wentz. Like, I still think that's the move they make, and I think it's even more geared towards fixing Wentz if Jalen Hurts isn't there. So I think Wentz is back in 2021. He's still the unquestioned starter. I think Sirianni is still the head coach, and I don't think they... Like, I thought maybe they go with a Jalen Hurts type route in the 2021 draft. They draft a quarterback in the second round of that year or the third round, but who are they going to draft? Like Kyle Trask? Like, that quarterback class was not good after day one. So I actually don't think that they bring in legitimate competition for Carson. I don't think they draft Justin Fields or Mac Jones. I don't think they try to trade up for Zach Wilson or for Trey Lance. Like, I don't think that's in the cards. Maybe they bring in an insurance policy. I think they definitely bring in a much better backup than like a Nate Sudfeld. That year, free agents were like Tyrod Taylor. Maybe they bring in Cam Newton. Maybe they do see some kind of reclamation project of a former top pick that could become the starter if Carson doesn't pan out. Like Mitchell Trubisky was a free agent that year. Maybe they bring in Trubisky. I think they would have liked his traits at the time. So that's probably the route they take, is they bring back Carson. They hope Sirianni can fix him. Looking back at that now, that would not have worked. They try to draft better. Like, hopefully they still take Devontae Smith and they build around Carson better when it comes to weapons. And then they bring in like a really proven backup just in case, like a Tyrod Taylor. Maybe it's Cam Newton. Maybe it's Mitchell Trubisky. But I don't think that they make any drastic decisions to try to replace Carson right away. And again, day two, like, there was no Jalen Hurts in that draft. Like, Kyle Trask was not that guy. Like, they weren't taking that kind of player, like a Kellen Mond type. Like, that I just don't think was in the cards for the Eagles' plan. So Carson Wentz is back, and let's say in 2021 he doesn't work again. The Eagles would have been, if they don't draft Jalen Hurts in this scenario, they would have been in some trouble if Carson didn't pan out, because the 2022 class, we all know, as much as I love Malik Willis, that was one of the worst quarterback classes of all time. I don't think the Eagles are taking Kenny Pickett that year. I don't think they're taking Malik Willis. I don't think they're going to go after Matt Corral or a Desmond Ridder. Like, they probably, if they don't draft Jalen Hurts and Carson still is terrible in 2020, they probably have to wait 2 more seasons to really have another shot at finding their franchise guy. I think they have to wait until the 2023 class. They probably move on from Carson after 2021. Maybe they give him one more chance. I doubt it if he's terrible 2 years in a row. The Eagles just don't operate like that. Maybe they have some type of like bridge stopgap starter, and then they probably focus on that 23 class that had Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson, and Will Levis. And I don't think the Eagles would have been bad enough to get Stroud or Young. I don't think Bryce Young is their kind of player anyway. You know who was their kind of player? Anthony Richardson or Will Levis. Maybe in this scenario, if they don't draft Jalen Hurts, maybe after Carson Wentz, you end up with Anthony Richardson and Will Levis. And those guys haven't been working out in the NFL, even despite their elite traits that they do possess, the size, the speed, the arm power. They have not panned out. Maybe they do in a better situation in Philadelphia, but man, like looking back, again, it's tough to say thank God they drafted Hurts because I don't think Wentz bombs out the way he does without Jalen being on the roster. But let's say he still does. Jalen saved them from like 4 years of quarterback purgatory, 4+ years. Because if Richardson and Will Levis don't work out, then, okay, you're looking at the 2024 class. Like, are they going after Jaden Daniels or Drake May? Like, Will Levis, I don't think he would have worked out in Philadelphia. Same with Anthony Richardson. So this scenario could have put them in quarterback purgatory for years and years. So in that way, taking Jalen Hurts was huge. But again, I don't think Wentz flops that hard without Jalen Hurts on the roster. I think that was the final straw that broke the camel's back. But an interesting scenario to talk about. I never really thought of it that way. What if Carson Wentz did come back in 2021, but Jalen Hurts was on the roster? Like, let's say he doesn't want out, he doesn't go to the Colts, and he battles Jalen that summer. How does that offseason play out? We'll get into that coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You've already been following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. I've been using FanDuel to bet on all these golf tournaments lately, even the non-majors. I think it makes those majors a lot more fun when you're betting on them. I'm a diehard Liverpool fan in the EPL. I take Liverpool money line pretty much every weekend. Whether you're placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet ride into the 9th inning of a baseball game, FanDuel makes it feel like you're part of the action every day. New to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5, and if that bet wins, you're going to get $150 back in bonus bets. So if that $5 bet wins, you'll get $150 back in bonus bets. So open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. We continue our What If series on today's edition of the show, and we've got some what if scenarios to ask about the quarterback position. The first one was, what if Carson Wentz still regressed in 2020, but Jalen Hurts wasn't on the roster? Like, let's say he's still equally as bad as he was that COVID year. It could have been really bad. It could have been years where they're waiting for a draft class like Anthony Richardson and Will Levis in 2023. And if that doesn't work, or they, going into 2025, like this year, do they give Richardson and Levis a couple years? Are they then, like in this past draft class, like talking themselves into one of these prospects that were just taken? Like, I don't know. It's a really interesting, like, is it Cam Ward? Is Cam Ward an Eagle? I don't know. But Hurts, and that's in that way kind of saved them from just more years of quarterback purgatory, which they were in for the majority of my time growing up as an Eagles fan in the 2010s. Like Michael Vick, flash in the pan, but couldn't sustain it. Same with Nick Foles. Sam Bradford wasn't the guy. Carson Wentz, flash in the pan, wasn't the guy. Jalen Hurts finally brought that sustainability that I had never seen for the Eagles at the franchise quarterback position. Let's say, though, let's talk about the scenario where Carson Wentz is terrible. Jalen Hurts is on the football team. And at the end of 2020, the Eagles still wanted to make it work with Carson Wentz. Like, they weren't planning on trading him until Carson Wentz demanded a trade. Like, he was pissed off. He felt betrayed. He felt like they set him up to fail. He wanted out. I think the Eagles, it wasn't the only reason they hired Nick Sirianni, because he had a lot of traits that Jeffrey Lurie normally looks for when he's hiring a head coach. But a big part of it was that Sirianni was Frank Wright's go-to guy. Carson Wentz had a lot of success with Frank Wright. Frank Wright had a lot of success with Carson Wentz. So I think that was a main part of bringing Sirianni in. Let's say that Carson Wentz was on board with that plan, and he said, you know what, I'm going to go into training camp. I'm going to beat out Jalen Hurts. I'm going to bounce back this year and show that that contract extension that's about to kick in 2021, I'm still worth every penny of that deal. How do things play out in that scenario? Like, does Carson Wentz beat out Jalen? Is he the starter in 2021? Is it still Jalen Hurts' football team moving forward? For me, look, I don't think that Carson Wentz would have ever been willing to do this. And even if he did, I think with Jalen Hurts on that roster, Carson was never getting back to even the player he was in 2019. He would have had Devontae Smith, though, probably, and would have had better weapons. But if Jalen Hurts was breathing down his neck, even if because I do think the Eagles, if they had an open quarterback competition that summer between Carson and Jalen, I think they would have hoped that Wentz wins that. They would have gave him the edge. Like, tiebreaker goes to Carson Wentz. But even if he's the starter to start off the season, I don't think he holds on to it all year, right? I think eventually Jalen Hurts still ends up playing in 2021. Like, if Carson comes back, I don't think that would have went well for him. And again, he was at the mindset when 2020 was over, the minute he got benched in Green Bay, mentally he was done. Like, he even said it, like, he was out of Philadelphia. He did not want to be there anymore. Again, he felt betrayed. And I think he's justified partly in that, even though he played his way to the bench. So a lot of that's on him. I do get some of his mindset for sure. Definitely see both sides. I think if he comes back, like I said, he likely gets the first chance to start. Tiebreaker goes to Carson. Jalen would have had to really beat him out. Like, clear and obvious, Hurts is QB1. I think eventually, though, Wentz still flames out. Jalen Hurts takes over. I just think the habits at that point were too far gone in Philadelphia with Wentz trying to play hero ball every single play, holding onto the ball too long, forcing turnovers. I don't think that would have got better because, again, with Jalen Hurts behind him, he still would have been trying to prove his own team wrong. And when Carson was feeling that kind of pressure, he normally didn't perform that well. So I think Jalen Hurts still ends up playing at some point. But I will say this. One catastrophic part of this scenario that would have played out is everything would have got delayed. And what I mean by that is if Jalen Hurts doesn't get all of 2021 to learn how to play quarterback, to lead the Eagles to the wild card round of the playoffs, if Jalen Hurts doesn't have that season to then build off of heading into 2022, where he becomes an MVP runner-up and ends up taking to the Eagles to the Super Bowl in only his second year as a starter, I don't think that happens if him and Carson Wentz are kind of playing quarterback roulette, quarterback musical chairs in 2021. If Jalen doesn't have that full season to start, like let's say Carson starts half the year, 3/4 of the year, and then Jalen takes over at the end, the Eagles don't make it to Super Bowl 57. And if they don't make it to Super Bowl 57, do they win Super Bowl 59? Like, I think everything would have been delayed. Like, do you get A.J. Brown in this scenario? A big reason A.J. Brown was traded to Philadelphia is because of Jalen Hurts being the quarterback. So also just think about it this way. The Carson Wentz trade, having all those assets, is what helped you get A.J. Brown. It's what helped you draft Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith and Devontae Smith and even Cooper DeJean last year. Like, that trade, the way Howie Roseman was able to turn it into all of these picks, all this flexibility to get his new nucleus that has taken him to 2 Super Bowls in 3 years and has won him another Lombardi trophy, that all happened. Jalen Hurts becoming who he is now, that all happened because Carson Wentz got traded that offseason. So if he comes back, I think the era we're in right now, I still think it probably eventually happens, right? Because Jalen Hurts still becomes who he is. I do still think they get Devontae Smith, but they might not have A.J. Brown. They might not have Jalen Carter or Cooper DeJean. They might not have a lot of this core that they were able to take because of all the picks they got that they built off of that Carson Wentz trade. So I think that's the biggest part of this what if. If Carson Wentz comes back in 2021, I don't know if you make these 2 Super Bowls in 3 years. I don't know if you have a second Lombardi trophy. I think eventually you probably get that, but I don't know if you have it in 2024. I think everything would have gotten delayed. Because again, everything had to happen the way it did in that order to get where we are now. Carson Wentz had to be traded. Jalen Hurts needed that entire 2021. He needed to get his butt kicked in the wild card round against Tom Brady to learn how to play quarterback. He needed A.J. Brown to help propel him into this elite status as a potential top 5 quarterback in football. And none of that happens without, as much as, I was a Carson Wentz guy, that trade, everyone knows that propelled you into becoming the team you are right now. So interesting stuff. Let me know what you think of these scenarios. How do you think it plays out? Hit us up on X at LockedOnBirds, at DBRCLOE. Coming up next, we'll wrap up this Thursday edition of Locked On Eagles talking about TJ Watt for Nolan Smith. Like, if this trade actually happened, how would you feel from an Eagles perspective? I don't want to say I wouldn't be happy. I don't think this is a trade that they should make, and I don't think it's something that's actually on the table right now. I'll tell you why coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. All right, Eagles fans, we're wrapping up this Thursday edition of Locked On Eagles. Thanks so much for making us your first listen each and every day. Right now, we got 3 to 4 shows a week for you daily from myself, and then we have 2 squad shows every Tuesday and Thursday live on YouTube. When training camp rolls back around, we'll be back to daily shows, my solo shows, going Monday through Friday on YouTube and all podcast platforms. I've been seeing this toss around, and I don't think it actually has any legs to it. I don't think the Eagles and the Steelers are talking about it, but the Eagles media, of course, likes to bring things up at the end of July or end of June because there's nothing else to talk about. So they like to, create trade rumors and drama kind of out of thin air and just talk about scenarios, which I totally get as somebody in the business. And I saw a Pittsburgh Steelers reporter kind of tinker with this idea. The idea is because the Steelers and TJ Watt are kind of in a contract standoff. The idea is the Eagles take advantage of that. They want TJ Watt, who is a top 3 pass rusher in football, to help them repeat in 2025. This is a move for the short term. They try to go all in right now and acquire TJ Watt. This Pittsburgh reporter suggested the idea of the Eagles trading Pittsburgh Nolan Smith and a late draft pick for TJ Watt. And he says if the Eagles offered it, not that they have, not that the Eagles would say yes, but from the Steelers side of things, if they got that offer from Philadelphia, that they would likely do it. So, and it's interesting. It is an interesting trade because TJ Watt right now is a much better football player than Nolan Smith. TJ Watt is a defensive player of the year candidate every single year. You can bank on him getting 11 to 20 sacks every year. He's going to get multiple interceptions. He's going to force a lot of turnovers. Like, he's one of the best defensive players of this era. That would certainly help you repeat in 2025. Like, imagine TJ Watt next to Jalen Carter. Like, that's just not fair. And Zach Bonds behind him and Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. Like, it would just add to what I think is a super team-like roster in Philadelphia. But for the Eagles, like, I would not do this trade. Howie Roseman, I don't think, would do the trade either. If Pittsburgh came to you and said, hey, we'll give you TJ Watt, but we want Nolan Smith and like a conditional 5th or 6th round pick. Deal? If I'm the Eagles, like, yeah, it would be really, really enticing for the short term. But from the long term, like, you got to be disciplined. Nolan Smith is only, how old is Nolan Smith? Is he even 24 years old yet? Let me check on this. TJ Watt's in his 30s. So it's going to be a short-term move. Nolan Smith is 24 years old. Nolan Smith has 3 more years on his rookie deal, 2 more, and then a 5th-year option the Eagles can exercise. So before a big extension would kick in for Nolan, you still have 3 years of pretty much cost-controlled rookie salary for a player that's ascending. Nolan Smith isn't TJ Watt, but Nolan Smith, I think, is going to be an elite player this year. He had over 10 sacks after the bye week last year, including the playoffs. He set a postseason franchise record for most sacks in a single playoff run with 4 or 4.5. He had at least 4 sacks in the postseason. He's only getting better. I think he's going to get double-digit sacks this year. The guy's got speed, athleticism, power. He's great against the run. He's a great leader. His pass rushing moves, like his counters, are developing. Like, I'm not getting rid of that kind of player. The core the Eagles have growing up together on defense, like, that's really important. I'm not trying to break up that nucleus. And again, financially, like, I just don't know how it works. Like, how do you pay TJ Watt? The reason this could happen is because Pittsburgh's not willing to give him the Myles Garrett contract. You bet your bottom dollar. I sound like an old man saying that, but I don't want to swear on the show. TJ Watt absolutely wants the Myles Garrett contract. He thinks he's going to get $40+ million a year. If not in Pittsburgh, somewhere. There's no way he's accepting less than, $30 to $35 million a year? If Myles Garrett got 40, I don't think he's even taking 30. It's 35 to 40. It might have to be over $40 million. I'm not doing that if I'm the Eagles. I'm not extending him to that contract at, he's over 30 years old. He does have an injury history. and you have the highest payroll in the NFL on offense. Like, where is this money coming from? You have to pay Jalen Carter that $35+ million contract in a couple years. You've paid Zach Bond. You eventually have to pay Quinyon Mitchell. And I don't think it makes sense from a long-term perspective, from a financial perspective, to backload a deal of a short-term veteran player. For as good as TJ Watt is, he's one of the best players in the world. You could make the argument he's a top 10 player in the NFL, and that helps you right now more than Nolan Smith. But I don't think it's worth it. I don't think it's worth the hoops you'd have to jump through to get this done. I like the timeline that the offense and defense are on. The offense is super expensive right now because everybody's in their prime. The defense is all young, growing up on these rookie contracts, and it's perfect. Financially, it's balanced perfect. Eventually, when Jalen Carter's got to get paid and Nolan Smith and Quinyon Mitchell, by the time they need deals, now you can start to get cheaper on offense. Like now, okay, these prime players are a little bit older. Lane Johnson, his expensive contract will come off the books. Saquon Barkley at that point will probably come off the books. Dallas Goedert. We can make a decision eventually about A.J. Brown. And, I think the offensive line is in their prime and they're not going anywhere anytime soon. But you could start to balance it more where there's some big contracts on offense, but some big contracts on defense. There's some top-end rookie picks on offense, and the same goes for the defense. And then the life cycle right now that we're on offense and defense just kind of balance out really well. I think it makes sense. And if you bring in TJ Watt right now, that kind of makes it more difficult to sustain the core that you have on both sides of the football. And also, I just think it's a lateral move. Like, yeah, TJ Watt's an upgrade over Nolan Smith, but we don't need an upgrade over Nolan Smith. We need an upgrade, more of a sure thing, over Jalix Hunt and Azeez Ojulari and Joshua Uche. As much as I really like those guys and think they're going to be good this year, it's risky. Who knows what you're going to get? Those are low floor, high ceiling players. I don't want to say Jalix Hunt's low floor, but he's not proven. TJ Watt's a proven star. So the whole point of trading for TJ Watt for me would be to pair him with Nolan Smith. Because if not, you still have a star edge rusher and then a bunch of guys with question marks. I think you have that right now. I think Nolan Smith is a star, and then you have a bunch of guys with question marks. So it just feels kind of like a redundant move, even for as good as TJ Watt is. The only way I'm bringing in Watt is if I don't have to give up Nolan Smith. And I'm not giving up a first or multiple day 2 picks for TJ Watt. I'm not doing it. I don't think the Eagles need him. As good as he is, I think they're fine. I think they have the best roster in football, and they're going to compete for a Super Bowl this year. I just think it makes things a lot more difficult financially, and you're going to have to give up draft compensation or a big-time asset like a 24-year-old Nolan Smith. Like, I'm just not willing to do it. And trust me, I know how good TJ Watt is. Like, I talked to Harry Mays on the Squad show today, and he's describing who you're getting in TJ Watt. Like, trust me, I understand in a vacuum. Of course I want Watt. If Howie Roseman can make it work, I am not a salary cap genius. I would understand why they would make this trade. Even if they did trade Nolan Smith, I would understand part of the logic. If I'm the GM, if Pittsburgh came to me with this offer, I wouldn't do it. And I don't think if Howie Roseman got this offer that he would do it either. But it's interesting. Again, there's no actual reports that they're talking about, that both sides are talking about this. But a Pittsburgh reporter brought it up, and Philadelphia media's been kind of taking it and running with it. And I definitely had some thoughts about it for sure. But no, I don't want to get rid of Nolan Smith. I think Nolan Smith is going to be one of those Brandon Graham, Fletcher Cox types that's here for 10 plus years. And he's a great locker room, culture, vocal leader. He's one of the most athletic pass rushers in football off the edge. He's really good against the run. Like, yeah, sorry, I don't want to get rid of that player who's cheap for another 3 years. Like, I'm good. I'm not getting rid of Nolan Smith. Not doing it. All right, guys, that's going to do it for today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. Thanks so much for making us your first listen each and every day. Even though tomorrow's the 4th, I still got another podcast dropping for you in the morning. So whether you're driving to the beach or the backyard barbecue, I'll got you covered right here talking all things Philadelphia Eagles. Thanks so much for making us your first listen each and every day. Thanks for downloading. Thanks for watching and listening. And as always, let's go Birds. Fly, Eagles, fly.